and on behalf of OTC Markets, we're very pleased you joined us for our oil and gas conference. We kick off today with a live presentation from Pulsar Helium. Please note you can submit questions for the presenter in the box to the left of the slides. You can also view a company's availability for one-on-one meetings through the Schedule Meetings tab found on the conference platform. At this point, I'm very pleased to welcome Thomas Abraham James. He's the President, Chief Executive Officer, and co-founder of Pulsar Helium, which trades as of this morning on the OTCQB venture market under the symbol PSRHF and on the TSX under the symbol PLSR. Welcome, Thomas.
Thank you very much for having me, and hello everybody. Thank you for joining in today. Here we are. We've got a freshly minted presentation, and I think the thing that we're most happy about at the moment is the top left-hand corner there. So yes, admitted onto the OTCQB today, which is really pleasing. And for all the interested parties in the US, it's now just a little bit easier to participate in our stock. So, Pulsar Helium, as the name suggests, we are a dedicated helium exploration and development company. And look, there's the legals. Anyone who wants to look at this in more detail, the presentation is available on our website. But what I'll do today is I'll talk for about 20 minutes, and then I'll leave 10 minutes Q&A at the end. So please, I encourage any questions that you may have to send them through. But for us, helium, it's an element, a commodity that you get out of the ground. And that's what we specialize in. So our flagship asset is in the USA. It's in the state of Minnesota. And there was a discovery made there, 2011? And it was made by chance. But that helium was 10.5% helium, which put it in really the top rankings of the USA's, of North America's highest helium concentration discoveries. And what we recently did last month was we completed an appraisal well. So it's drilling roughly 50 feet from that original discovery, twinning it with the objective of replicating the result, going deeper and using a proper gas rig so we could do all the testing. That was successful, and we announced just the other day that the laboratory results came back with up to 13.8% helium. So we're off to a wonderful start. And really now it's beyond any doubt that we're dealing with a helium system which is truly remarkable. And now we go off and extract all the data we can and realize its full potential. It's worth noting too that 13.8% helium. What does that mean? Anything which is above 0.3% helium in the raw gas is deemed to be of potential economic significance. So here we are. So our primary listing is in Canada, ticker PLSR. And so now it's slightly more easily traded in the US on the OTCQB. So we're a company that's only been in existence as a listed company since the middle of August. That's when we listed on the TSXV, and that was via IPO. So maybe worth touching here on the shareholder base. So we have majority ownership from the founders of the company and management, so principals, non-principals. So we collectively hold roughly about 40% of the company. That's important. We've got a very much a vested interest in this company being successful, the long-term success. So much so that we have gone, I guess you could say, above and beyond with our escrow arrangements. So for us, all the founding principals, founding shareholders, we're locked up there for a period of up to 3 years. So certainly believe in the long-term potential of this company. So who are we? So myself, just a little bit of background. So I've been in the helium industry now for a decade. So geologist by trade, but 10 years ago, I co-founded what was the world's first helium exploration company, a company called Helium One Global, which is listed in London. And so alongside me there, our founding chairman was Neil Herbert. So he too has the great experience in helium, as well as other sort of specialist commodities as well. And then we've got Doris Mayer, who's there with our compliance corporate background in Canada. John Ferrier used to be the CEO of Gulf Keystone Petroleum, which is a producer in Iraq and listed in London. Brice Laurent, who's recently joined our board with a major investment group that was made just a couple of months ago. And then Stu Crow, who brings wonderful corporate experience and certainly with the North American financial markets. It's also worth mentioning too that not here is that we have our senior managers, Josh Blewett and Michael Sturdy, so technical and operations respectively. So Josh was our founding member as well for Pulsar, but then also that decade ago, he was also the co-founder of Helium One. So I guess what we're trying to say is that technically, financially, operationally, we do have wonderful experience, and we, with every aspect of the helium as a commodity, quite well versed in it, from the exploration through to the bigger picture of development. Advantages, really. So our flagship project, which I'll talk about mostly today, is the Topaz project. It's located in Minnesota. The USA is the single largest consumer of helium. Helium is notoriously difficult to transport, so being close to market is super important. Really, if you have helium there being transported for extended periods of time, you can get losses. It's a bit like having a helium balloon. After a week, it looks a bit sad. The same happens when you're doing bulk transportation of helium as well. So the closer to source, the better. What is now the highest concentration of helium that's been drilled at our appraisal well in Minnesota. And really, the fundamentals of helium are extremely strong for a business like ours because it's been in short supply for a decade, and the price of helium has reflected that. And then also, about 95% of the world's helium at this present moment in time is a byproduct of natural gas production. For any commodity, you don't like being the byproduct. You're always second fiddle. So the rate of helium that's produced is at the rate of the production for natural gas. Just with the scale of economics there, it's unlikely to change. So what we've seen is a steady increase in the price of helium. So historically, the USA, the federal helium system, was the benchmark for pricing, which is down the bottom here. And then what we saw about a decade ago is that they realized that reserve was starting to run thin in supply, and so then started to doing auction price for the crude helium gas, and then that went up quite significantly. And then with the new helium companies out there that are going into production and that are being listed, they have to disclose what their offtakes are. So we're seeing now prices for gaseous helium of around about $600 to $700, for liquid helium in excess of $1,000, and this is per 1,000 cubic feet is the unit of measurement. Natural gas at the moment is around about $5, $6 per 1,000 cubic feet, to give you an idea of scale. The helium market itself, it's growing. I mean, really, one of the key takeaways with this slide is that actually it's one of these rare situations where demand is curtailed by supply. So a lot of end users are receiving allocations of the full quantum that they wish to receive. So it's very tight, and new sources are definitely desired. And really, in the USA, production has gone into decline, and that's really because of aged gas fields, older gas fields, less production. And to fill the gap now, we see that the world's largest producer is going to be Qatar in the Middle East on the back of their natural gas production. And what's it used for? So the big one that everyone talks about now is semiconductors. You need liquid helium to be able to fabricate those, MRI scanners, space launch, fiber optic cable manufacturing, computer hard drives. So really, people talk about helium balloons, party balloons. That's about 3 to 5% of market share. The rest is very much high tech. So let's get into our projects. So we have two projects. So once again, the one I'll be talking about mostly is Topaz in Minnesota. But we also have a second project, which is Tunu in Greenland. Tunu is a project that we generated in-house. It's worth mentioning to find primary helium where it's not associated with hydrocarbons. There's really only a few geological environments on the planet where you can find it. So that would be predominantly East Africa, North America, and then extending up into Greenland. So we're the first helium exploration company in Greenland, and there it's an overseas territory for the European Union where helium is on the critical list. So that one is being advanced, but the major priority for us is Topaz, only because it's more advanced and it's extraordinarily high concentration. That 13.8% helium really is something that gives it a wonderful head start. So it's in northern Minnesota, to the north of Duluth, near Lake Superior, so just to the west of that. So in terms of the impact news flow, some of this we've already completed. And so that was at the end of last year. We did a passive seismic survey, which really, I mean, the discovery in Minnesota was made by chance. I'll get into that in a moment. So a discovery was made without any of the typical lead-up data that you'd expect, so geochemistry, geophysics. So really in the lead up to listing the company, we've been acquiring that data, gravity, magnetics, and then finally the seismic data. Lease applications, we are the first mover in Minnesota, so we've been going off and securing the mineral rights in the areas of interest, and that's been very successful. Then we just completed drilling the appraisal well last month, and we're in the process of now getting all the data out of that. And that will really then later on in the few months after that, we'll then give all of that data off to our resource estimator, which is a group called Sproul in the USA, the Denver office, who will then conduct a resource update. And that is a real significant milestone for us, that's for sure. Location. So here we are once again. So northern Minnesota. Great location because it's got a very rich history of resource extraction and therefore the associated infrastructure with it in terms of road networks, service providers, access to the Great Lakes for shipping. It really is all there. So about 150 years of extraction history, particularly when it comes to taconite or iron ore mining. So we're right by the big open cut mines there. The other thing is that helium is transported by road. So to get anywhere in the contiguous United States, you're looking at probably a maximum of 2 days trucking. So helium's transported in customized 40-foot shipping containers. They look a bit like LNG containers. So it goes on a truck and then off it goes. Otherwise, we could put it on the Great Lakes as well, onto a vessel there. But the rule of thumb is that you don't really want the helium to be in a container for more than sort of 25 to 45 days, depending on the age of the container. And so that gives us a significant advantage over overseas importers to the US, because as soon as you hit that number of days, then really you can get loss of product via leakage. And so potentially you could buy from an overseas source, and by the time it arrives on your doorstep, you may have lost a fairly significant percentage of what you actually paid for. So location is key. Sealed road networks, electricity nearby, and being in the USA. And also a highly skilled workforce there as well. So certainly no need to be looking at any foreign labor. And certainly with our engagement there with the local communities, wonderfully supportive. And, we do everything we possibly can to be a great addition to the local community. So in terms of the original discovery, so it was discovered 2011 by chance. A company was out there looking for nickel and platinum. They were drilling down this particular location. And then at just shy of 1,800 feet, they hit gas. It must have been terrifying because they weren't expecting it. And that was overpressure gas. And so what it did was it blew out the bottom of the hole. So from 1,800 feet up to surface, about 9 feet of core. So what you see in the tray there in the photo. And that shot out the top of the drill rig and sent off like a projectile. Of course, the concern was then, is it flammable gas? And that was, they took numerous samples of the gas, sent it off to 2 laboratories. They both came back saying it was non-flammable gas. And they both correlated and agreed that there was 10.5% helium in those samples. Now, at that particular moment in time, no one was out looking for helium. It was not of interest. But then when we were introduced to it, when the ground became available, that's when really Pulsar Helium was born. So that was in 2019. We also then looked around and see, is this an isolated occurrence? Is this just a pocket? But we know that hole was open for 4 days. From someone who was there at site, he said it sounded like being near a jet engine. The gas is really roaring out of the ground. It was open for 4 days before it was sealed off, and there's no obvious loss in pressure, and it didn't really stop. So it looks like it's quite a large accumulation. And then looking through the records, we found that only one other well in Minnesota had been analyzed for helium, and that was another unexpected gas discovery about 100 miles off to the southwest, and there it came back with 2% helium. So we really think that we're looking at something that's just got real significant scale. It's not just an isolated occurrence. So now onto the appraisal well. So this is what we call the Jetstream number 1 well. It was completed at the end of February, so only 3 weeks ago today. And here it is, me in my glorious high vis, and the rig in the background. And so, yes, the objective was we drill 50 feet away from the original discovery, and then we go and we attempt to replicate the results. We then push deeper, so we drill down to 2,200 feet, and then see if we can find that gas, and with a proper gas rig as well to do all the testing that one would anticipate. So we drilled down, got to that 2,200 feet. Gas was coming back up to surface that we were able to analyze using an on-site mass spectrometer. And then we also took samples that we sent off to two laboratories. And they came back with analysis up to 13.8% helium. Now, one question I do receive quite a lot is, okay, why do you talk about the big result of 13.8%? What were the other ones? So what we had is that this was, the samples weren't taken down the hole. They were taken when they came back up to surface. So there was an element of contamination from atmosphere. So from the air that we breathe gets into the sample. And so what that does is it dilutes the gas that's coming from depth. And so really we gave those samples across to Dr. Peter Barry at the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute. He then went and crunched all the data, so it's not just the helium analysis we had, but all the other gases, to then determine what is that atmospheric contamination and which is the most representative sample. Now, there's 5 parts per million helium in the air that we breathe, and there's no other source of contamination nearby. So really the highest helium number that you get with the least amount of atmospheric contamination is the believable number. So that's why we quote that number and we stand by it. And certainly with the previous hole, which was drilled shallower, they were getting 10.5% helium. So going deeper, it shows that perhaps there's better potential. So then at the time too, we had Baker Hughes come out to site. They collected a downhole wireline data. So this is a whole bunch of different tools that go down the hole to give you reservoir characteristics. We have that data was then about a week to get processed, and it's now currently being interpreted. So that one is being looked at by a petrophysicist, and that one we will be disclosing to the market as soon as we get that information back. And then also we have to conduct a pressure buildup and flow testing. So that's something that we are looking to do as soon as we can. So for those of you who are in northern Minnesota or indeed northern North America, you can appreciate that during the winter time there, that there's certain road restrictions that are put in place. So you have winter frozen conditions, and then when you get the thaw, and then you go into spring and summer, that those roads are closed off for a period of time so that there's no significant damage to them. So that's what happened, is that it was a very abnormal winter. And so it was very warm, and so the winter road conditions ended earlier than we anticipated. So we are not able to bring in the heavy traffic until we get notice from the Department of Transportation that the access road is available for heavy traffic again. So it appears that we'll get about 5 days, 7 days notice for that. So we are prepared for as soon as that occurs, that we'll go in and then get the last bit of data that we can from the well, which is the pressure and the flow tests. And then we'll give all of the data off to Sproul, who will then do the resource update and calculation. It's worth noting too that where we are, so it's a combination, is that sort of checkerboard of licensing system in the United States, and where we are, it's on private mineral rights and private surface rights. Cognizant of the time here, I've got a few more minutes left so I can then do questions. But here, this is a cutaway showing the ambient noise tomography, also known as the passive seismic. And so here we've got the drill trace in red for the original discovery hole. What we found is that where it is, it correlates with where you're getting into this green zone. And what does the green and the red mean? Basically means that you're seeing quite a significant change in the velocity there of the waves. So you're seeing something quite remarkable there that coincides with where the gas is hit. So once we get all the petrophysics results back and the downhole logging, then we should be able to say a little bit more about what does that green represent, and therefore its potential as a host for helium. And certainly it's a target that we've got our eyes on, that's for sure. And quite extensive, as you see here. So this is now looking in plan view, so looking from up in the sky down on the ground. You can see that it's open to the north, up to the west, and to the south as well. So this correlates with what we think is quite a large helium system. So the roadmap to success, appreciate that helium is not something that everybody is familiar with. It's a very new industry, but basically these are the sort of steps to go through: identify, lease, get all the data that you can. This is where our two new project in Greenland is. So we're able to get gas samples from helium that's coming up to surface via hot springs, and then existing geophysical data. So then after that, the logical next step is to go and get some geophysical data and then lead to drilling. Resource calculation, then drill exploration appraisal wells, which is where Topaz is, and then we start to look at reserves, offtakes, and production. So it's we're certainly by no means all the way through, but there's a lot of exciting news to come for this one. So look, I'll leave it there with contact details, and at this moment in time, I'm going to switch across to questions. With the format, you get to hear my voice again. I'm going to read out the questions and then answer them. So the first question I see here is, well, it's a nice one. I'm keen to buy Pulsar stock. I'm a US citizen. In layman's terms, exactly how do I go about it? Okay, well, it's just been made slightly simpler now that we're on the OTCQB. So that means, so our primary listing is in Canada, of course, which is Canadian dollars. But with the OTCQB, now able to purchase stock in the USA using US dollars. So I would just recommend reaching out to a stockbroker, of which there's no shortage in the United States, and just express the interest and just mention that that ticker of ours, PSRHF, and I'm sure they'll be able to help you. Okay, next question is, hi, I live in the US and have been following Pulsar for some time. Okay, great, thank you. What does the short-term news flow look like? Okay, so as I was alluding to in the presentation, so really the wireline data from Baker Hughes, that won't be too far away. Then when we can get access onto site, once again, hopefully not too far away, then we'll do the pressure build-up and flow testing. And then with all that data, we'll then give it to our resource estimator, Sproul, in Denver. And Sproul's, this is what they specialize in, the really top shelf resource calculation group. And they will then do that resource update. And really what that means is that they'll then give us the calculation for what they determine to be the quantity of gas that's there, helium-bearing gas, and then attach a risk profile to it as well. Okay, next question. Okay, if Jetstream 1 flows as hoped, will you be able to go into production from this one well? What is the rough range of capex for a production plant? What kind of revenues do you think it could bring in? Okay, well, that's a nice one. 3 questions in one. So first question is, go into production from one well. Okay, the way that we designed this well and the way that we drilled it is that it could be used for production, definitely. So we don't want to have to go back and redo it all again. Now, to give you, could you use one for production? Potentially. If we've got those good flow rates there, then if we look at, say, some other helium producers where they don't have natural gas, we know that production facilities have been installed where they've had 3 producing wells and a helium concentration about 0.5%. So if we were to have, say, similar flow rates to what they have or better, then they would need to have total of about 28 holes to be equivalent to R1. So really, that high grade helps an awful lot. And plus the overall amount of gas that you need to find, of overall raw gas, is less because it's such a high concentration. So I guess a long way of answering a question, but potentially yes. Next one, rough range of capex for a production plant. We're looking at liquid helium, so that's the most valuable product, and so certainly, being the only potential helium producer in Minnesota, there is no existing helium infrastructure. So what we would look at is liquefaction, so constructing a liquid plant right by the any producing wells that are there, and for something which is could be a decent sized producer, you'd probably looking at about $50 million US capex cost, roughly. So to be confirmed, but that's a sort of ballpark figure you could be looking at. What kind of revenues do we think that we could bring in? Well, this is all hypothetical, but the price of helium is very high. So for gaseous helium, you're looking at over $700 per 1,000 cubic feet. For liquid helium, 1,000 plus. And each container holds 1 million cubic feet of helium. So, that's potentially, roughly $1 million worth of product per container. So I'll let you do the math with that one, but it looks good. Okay, so next one. What is the roadmap and timing to production? So I think I said that. So really, in the next few months, we want to get that resource update out. Should that look good, then the next step is that we go off and do a feasibility study, and then really we then be looking at to actually fabricate a plant and install it. These things are not big, so it's nothing like a natural gas facility, which is the size of a small city. Yeah, you're probably looking at something which is the size of a sort of medium-sized warehouse. And this is just because the volumes of helium that are used in the world are not huge, and there's nothing nasty there. You haven't got any combustibles, and you haven't got, your only consumable is electricity. So really, it's the installation of it, fabrication, you've got permitting as well. But, there's no reason why, perhaps if everything went well, that towards the end of next year, might be getting to the point where that's possible. Okay. Have you had any inbound interest from potential off-takers? Well, look, the commodity we're looking at is in very short supply, so helium. So all I can say is that there are indeed a lot of eyes on us. Okay, what in-state end users are there for your gas? Okay, so well, I know that in the state of Minnesota, there are quite a few end users for helium. There's a lot of semiconductor manufacturing that occurs in Minnesota, so certainly that's one group that we'd be, happy to engage with. There's also some distribution companies as well, so some of the independent distributors out there, and so the state of Minnesota, really, within only a couple of hours' drive of our project, there are some really significant users there. Okay. There was news on media about Pulsar potentially discovering the largest helium resource in North America. Is that a realistic expectation? I mean, really, with this, you've got to aim for the stars, right? I mean, that's why we're in this business. We're not here to find something tiny, we're not here to find something which is of academic interest. I've talked about with our production that we're looking at liquefaction, and we've got a wonderful head start. We've got something here which we know historically has flowed wonderfully. It sounded like a jet engine going off, and we'll get more data about that in the coming weeks. We also know that now, confirmed by industry experts, that this is the highest concentration of helium seen in a well, so on a global basis. So really, I think that it's got all the potential in the world, and our job is to realize it. Okay, I grew up on Minnesota's Iron Range. Well, thank you for tuning in. I still own property there and have family. How has engagement with locals been? Do you feel you have or will be able to win over resource extraction skeptics? Good question. So with this, there were two options that we could take when we started working, and particularly when drilling the well, and that was where we fly underneath the radar, or we go for full transparency. And for me, it was a very easy one, full transparency. So we invited as many key stakeholders to come to site as possible so they could see it with their own eyes. So we had government officials, we had local community members from Babbitt and Ely, we had media come out, we had lots of people from all around the place. So I think that ultimately we had 80 people come to site, so the drillers were starting to feel that what's happening, why they're like rock stars. But it was really good because yes, there were some skeptics, and what was really nice is that they were able to see it with their own eyes. And by the end of it, I've got a very high level of confidence that everyone walked away feeling very happy that it was something that they would have a level of comfort in. They could see that we were with things like any aquifer that's present, so casing that off and sealing it so that there could never be any disturbance of any aquifer if it were there. So going above and beyond the regulations. All the consumables that we use, or down the hole, they're all food grade as well. So we showed them that. I wouldn't really recommend eating it, but it's things like wood chips, sawdust, gypsum, organic material. So we don't use any chemicals. So really going above and beyond, and that, and then the small footprint, the sort of strategic nature of helium, and being inert, non-flammable, non-toxic. I think people could see that really have a potential to be a very positive addition to the local community and the economy. Um, so what other questions have we got? Okay. How big would the reserve need to be in order to be productive? Um, with it, we'd probably be looking at with that. Once again, it's hard to put an absolute finger on it until we start getting the feasibility stage. But really, we'd be looking at you'd want to have something which could justify at least 5 years worth of production, as a minimum. So that one is something that in the coming months later this year that I'll be able to give a more definitive answer to. And I think that is. Have we got any other questions here? Excuse me. Let's have a quick look. Okay, so what was the wind speed at the well opening measured as was done by the previous explorer? Okay, so this one was okay, so when the original discovery was made in 2011, the gas coming out the ground, the one that sounded a bit like a jet engine, they didn't have the flow testing equipment there, but they were quite inventive. They usually did a bit of a MacGyver job. So what they did was they got a wind meter, something that you'd have at home for measuring wind speed, and they put that where the gas was coming out the ground. And that particular device could measure up to 150 kilometers an hour, which it reached, and then the gas destroyed it. It was coming out much faster than that and tore it to shreds. So I guess we could say it's a minimum velocity of 150 kilometers an hour. Next question. Do you see a possible expansion of existing Topaz operation if warranted by supply? We think we're looking at something quite large here. So really, we're focusing on where we just drilled and the immediate vicinity of it, which maybe we'll know soon. If that in itself could support an operation, but in terms of determining the true potential of the broader system that's there, that's certainly something that we intend to do. And so that would be with the seismic data that we've got, get some more of that, and then that would then result in an additional drilling occurring as well. So step out wells going further afield into the blue sky to then see what the potential is further afield from where we have been focusing. Okay, next one. The 13% concentration is off the scale. Can you explain how this affects the economics of production? Yeah, I mean, it's like any commodity that grade is king. It basically means that the amount of raw gas that you need to find is less than should it be a lower concentration helium. So it's just that scale of the overall gas you need to find to justify any production is less because it's so high concentration. And then the amount of gas that's being processed in a production facility is less because it's so high concentration. So really it's a win-win so on both accounts. And the effect could only be positive. High concentration helium is not going to be negative in any way, shape, or form. So it's a wonderful thing to have. Okay. How will the discovery affect pricing and availability of helium in the market, and how quickly? Well, look, should we get into production, then yeah, look, to have a potential new supply source. Our hope is that it would bring some stability to global supply. Its supply is. Demand is curtailed at the moment by supply. So if there was a certain level of comfort that there was now no fear of not getting their allocation, we might see an uptake in the use of helium. So that could be very positive that there's more demand for product. So that's how I see it. Regarding pricing, I could only speculate, I'm afraid. Okay. Would you sell the company if you received a suitable offer? Well, look, we've got work to do. I think that for starters, a lot of the shares are held by management. We have a real vested interest to see this through, see it through the value chain. And quite frankly, I quite like the thought of being an independent producer. I think that could be very advantageous. But then who am I to say, what other shareholders would say if there was an offer out there? Who knows? Okay. Okay, is there any use for the balance of the gas? Yeah, so the balance of the gas. So most of the other gas that's not helium is CO2 and nitrogen. So nitrogen, there is no real commercial value to that. There may be some end users in Minnesota who'd like some, so we'd be happy to help with that. But the big one is CO2. So Minnesota is an importer of CO2, and also CO2 has been in short supply in the USA, not just Minnesota, but the broader USA now for a few years. Sounds a bit weird to say that, but the reason is that CO2 from emissions cannot be easily used for things like food or beverage or indeed medical. So needs to be a pure form of CO2 that is not contaminated with ash, sulfur, and other things. So, one thing we're looking at is how could we offset imports of CO2 to Minnesota, so it could be used in those things. So, yeah, it's that's a distinct possibility. It's CO2 is something that had to be very careful with, but at the same time, it's something that's being used, and there is no sort of no substitute for it. So otherwise, for us, if there was no market, which I don't think is the case, then we'd be putting it back in the ground. All right, that looks like all of the questions I've received. So I'll sign off now. I'd like to say thank you very much. Please get in touch if you've got anything you'd like to follow up on. We're very approachable, and I'd like to thank everyone for this opportunity. Very grateful.